Right in the heart of Beijing, it was the home of emperors for 500 years. It has witnessed China's major political events during imperial times and ever since. The Forbidden City, its 900 halls and palaces, constitute the largest wooden building complex in the world. And its Palace Museum houses a vast collection of imperial artworks and artifacts from Ming and Qing times. Watch the Forbidden City on Journeys in Time.
On October the 10th, 1925, more than 3,000 distinguished guests and 20,000 ordinary citizens gathered on the square at the Gate of Heavenly Purity in the Forbidden City to witness a special event, the opening ceremony of the Palace Museum. During the proceedings, a horizontal plaque inscribed with the words Palace Museum was placed above the Gate of Divine Prowess. The name change from Forbidden City to Palace Museum meant that from this day on it would no longer be an imperial palace, a place that had been forbidden to everyday people for several hundred years. This renowned historic site was now officially open to the public, and millions of common people could enter this once mysterious place.
当时很多人就说，我这一生能够有机会踏进故宫，那就满足了，
就能瞧见那个钟，各种的钟，各种的钟啊，还有瞧些个什么，他们瞧的瓷器我就不懂了。
成立以后，我就记得那时候去参观礼拜几是哪一路哪一栋。
Most people visit the Palace Museum out of curiosity with regard to the life of the imperial family, but some visitors come especially to see the imperial collection of paintings and works of calligraphy.
第一是有老师教导说这个东西啊是真的是假的是好的是坏的，那么这样的这3天里头那收获大了， 但是旁边人看呢，随便看着玩那另说了。我们有意来学画那是天上飞下来的宝贝。
This was not only the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new period in history. People who had been caught up in this inevitable process of change, whether they had been conscious or unaware, whether they had been acting passively or on their own initiative, had been destined to leave their footprints in history. This, the oldest film footage of the Forbidden City, was taken in 1903 by one Clinton Simmons. 5 years after this footage was filmed, Ai Xinzhuo Luo Puyi ascended the throne. But just 3 years later, the revolution of 1911, led by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, broke out. On January the 6th, 1912, Puyi saw Empress Dowager Longyu weeping in the Hall of Mental Cultivation, and an old minister kneeling before her, weeping as well. Puyi could not know that the old minister was Yuan Shikai, who would soon declare himself emperor, but remain on the throne for only a few days. Puyi asked Empress Dowager Longyu to let him abdicate, and just a month later the Empress Dowager issued the Imperial Edict of Abdication. Puyi had ascended the throne at the age of 6, but remained emperor for only 3 years. These old photos of the Forbidden City were taken around the time of Puyi's abdication. In return for the peaceful abdication, the Republic government issued the Articles of Favorable Treatment of the Qing House, which allowed for the Qing Emperor to retain his title, receive from the Republic of China an annual allowance of 4 million yuan, and live in the rear part of the Forbidden City. And so it was that Puyi remained as the master of a small court, but not of an empire. This is the original Imperial Edict of Abdication. It was issued by Empress Dowager Longyu to the ministries. The Qing imperial family, headed by the abdicated Emperor Puyi, was permitted to live in the inner palace of the Forbidden City. The palace was divided, as it had always been, by the Gate of Heavenly Purity into 2 parts, but now the south part belonged to the government of the Republic of China, while the north part was for the abdicated imperial family. This was a unique situation in the Forbidden City's history of several hundred years, and a strange phenomenon in Beijing. There was now a small state within a large country.
刘溥仪还小呢，17、18岁呀。他岁数还小，所以说还是愿意跟小孩一块玩。
Guo Buluo Runqi, the younger brother of Wan Rong, the last empress, remembers those days when he played in the Forbidden City with Puyi, who was 7 years his senior.
我母亲骑自行车在家里，我就学会了骑自行车。后来我就 带到溥仪那儿，溥仪就买了很多自行车，大家都学。这个连婉容也学，有相片婉容也会骑了。
This threshold was removed so that Puyi could ride through the gates.
溥仪的话呢，他生活在这种只能在宫内这样一个小天地的生活来说，对他来说也是很苦恼的事情。他不能出去。
在这个溥仪这个后半生的时候啊，他曾经讲过一句话，他说：“我这一生啊，就是高墙。在宫内一生下来是王府，3岁就进宫当皇帝，一眼看到就是高墙，什么紫禁城的高墙。”
But although Puyi was not allowed to leave the Forbidden City, the high palace walls could not totally isolate him from the outside. The first archives of Chinese history retains newspapers Puyi subscribed to when he lived in the palace, and it is clear that these newspapers and magazines exerted a subtle influence on him. Influenced by his English teacher Sir Reginald Fleming Johnston, Puyi adopted elements of a Western lifestyle. In his autobiography, The First Half of My Life, Puyi wrote, "After my English teacher Sir Reginald Fleming Johnston entered the palace, I became the most troublesome emperor for all. I had my plate cut because Sir Reginald said that the plate of a Chinese was like a pigtail. The empress and concubines and ministers were in deep sorrow. My teachers tried to talk me out of getting a telephone installed. They said that if a telephone was installed, anybody would be able to talk to the emperor, and this was against the rights. I got the telephone anyway."
有了电话，他觉得这个笼中的小鸟啊，有了跟外界沟通的一个机会了，那就四处打电话。
不知道怎么一拨呢，就拨到胡适那儿去了。
他给这个胡适打电话的时候呢，给胡适吓了一跳。他也不说自己是谁，说：“你是胡适吗？”胡适说：“是啊。”说：“这个你是谁？”“我是谁？”说：“那你猜猜。”真的猜不着。然后呢，溥仪哈哈哈哈就一笑。我告诉你，我是宣统。
In 1916, Yuan Shikai had made himself emperor. Soon afterwards, he had ordered the Manchu scripts on the horizontal boards of the 3 great halls in the front palace cut down. The Qing imperial family was now feeling uneasy and was planning to move to the summer palace. As a former minister of the Qing dynasty, Yuan Shikai promised not to change the articles of favorable treatment of the Qing house. Oddly, during a period of 83 days, 2 emperors lived in the same palace in peace. A year later, in 1917, however, Jiang Xuan staged a campaign to restore the monarchy, and Puyi became emperor again for 12 days. Power changed hands in succession, and the common people were kept busy changing national flags to match, and many families kept both the flag of the Republic and the dragon flag at home. At the same time, concepts relating to democracy and science were being accepted by more and more people. But in China in the early 20th century, an even more profound and greater change was in the making. The fire was first spotted by the firefighters in the Italian legation, but when the fire truck arrived at the gate of the Forbidden City, the gatekeeper had no idea of what was going on. The Palace of Good Fortune had been burned to the ground, and to this day, no one knows just how many treasures were destroyed in the fire.
当然，建福宫事件只是一个导火索，但是肯定是这件事情对于当时溥仪朝廷是非常不利的，应该是激起了全国的公愤。
This exhibition on Puyi's life shows how he had lived in the palace. The abdicated imperial family stayed in the Forbidden City for 13 years from 1912 to 1924. The Articles of Favourable Treatment of the Qing House stipulated that the imperial family would move out of the Forbidden City at some later date, but this had not been enforced by the presidents of the Republic of China. History was to give General Feng Yuxiang this historic opportunity. In the winter of 1924, 36 soldiers and policemen entered the inner palace of the Forbidden City. They were headed by Lu Zhonglin, Commander-in-Chief of the Beijing garrison, Zhang Bi, Director of the Police Department, and Li Yuying, a representative of the citizens. They showed Xiao Ying, Supervisor of the Imperial House, the revised Articles of Favourable Treatment of the Qing House, and ordered the abdicated emperor to move out of the palace immediately. At the time, Puyi and his Empress Wanrong were eating apples in the Palace of Preserved Elegance. The sudden and unexpected demand threw them into panic. They asked for a number of days to prepare for the move, and then repeatedly pleaded for mercy. But Lu Zhonglin responded by threatening to bombard them with cannon fire from the top of Jingshan Hill if they refused to move out. Puyi had no choice but to leave in a hurry, and so the imperial family bid farewell to the Forbidden City forever.
看报！看报！看报！看报！冯玉祥把宣统皇帝赶出皇宫了！看报！看报！看报！看报！
These two photos were taken as Puyi, eunuchs and court ladies left the palace. The next day, Lu Zhonglin and Li Yuying came to the Hall of Union and Peace to check on the imperial seals, the symbols of imperial power. As the imperial seals were being checked, cultural relics workers restored the original arrangement of the seals on the two sides of the throne. According to the list, there should have been 23 imperial jade seals, and today they have been well preserved and are kept in the Palace Museum. The monarchy in China had come to an end, and people in Beijing celebrated the event with firecrackers. Song Baoluo, a Peking opera singer who was just 8 years old at the time, remembers his performance in honor of General Feng Yuxiang.
就是庆功会，那个好大概有几万部队嘛， 都在看戏，这黑压压的一片。那时候冯玉祥嘛，穿一个灰色布的棉裤棉袄，还有他的爱人李德全给了我两块大洋。哎，冯玉祥嘛，抓了一把花生给我，大家很开心的。
No one knew what it was like inside the palace. But on November the 20th, 1924, the Commission for the Custody of Qing House Property was established. Its chairman was Li Yuying, the son of Li Hongzhao, who had been a key minister in the late Qing dynasty. Some very well-known people became members of the commission, including Cai Yuanpei, Chen Yuan, Shen Jianshi, Lu Zhonglin, Zhang Bi, and Yu Tonghui, and together they shared the Commission's responsibility of sorting out the imperial treasures and dealing with related matters. All Chinese rulers had engaged in the tradition of collecting cultural relics to a greater or lesser extent, and whenever a new dynasty was established, it would take over all the collections of the previous dynasty. The Commission decided to give the treasures of the Qing imperial court to the government of the Republic of China. Wu Ying, who was 33 years old when Puyi was dispelled from the Forbidden City, was the Department Chief of Police of the Northern Government and was in charge of supervising the abdicated Emperor Puyi and his family. But after Puyi was dispelled from the palace, Wu Ying became a councillor on the imperial palace. His eldest daughter said that the passion her father had for the imperial palace came from their love of ancient Chinese cultural relics.
都喜欢玩古董，知道，所以他来北京就是逛琉璃厂，他们就一块儿去买这些，看这些。每礼拜我知道又上琉璃厂去了。
Just as the Commission for the Custody of Qing House Property was to make an inventory of the treasures, the situation changed yet again. Zhang Zuolin, a warlord from northeast China, led his troops in occupying Beijing, and the next day the abdicated imperial Qing house proclaimed, "All the revisions to the favourable treatment of the Qing house cannot be deemed as valid." Puyi later stated in a newspaper article that he was forced to sign the document. But the Commission had to cancel the preliminary meeting for the inventory that had been scheduled for November the 22nd.
Right in the heart of Beijing, it was the home of emperors for 500 years. It has witnessed China's major political events during imperial times and ever since. The Forbidden City, its 900 halls and palaces, constitute the largest wooden building complex in the world. And its palace museum houses a vast collection of imperial artworks and artifacts from Ming and Qing times. Watch the Forbidden City on Journeys in Time.